What would happen if everything suddenly shut down? You look at your cell phone, no signal. The television only displays a white hiss. The streetlights flicker one last time before going out completely. The world sinks into a silence that shouldn't exist. No radio works, no satellites respond, no transmission. Cars stopped on the streets. Planes falling from the sky, hospitals without power. Chaos spreads like an invisible virus. This is not an attack. It's not a technical failure. It's something much bigger. Something that has happened before. Scientists have detected a gigantic crack in the sun, an anomaly that could be about to unleash a solar storm of catastrophic proportions. What does this mean? Are we facing an event that could change the history of humanity forever? Now, stop and think for a moment. Right this second, all the screens went black and the entire world was plunged into silence, what would you do? Do you have a plan? Would you know where to go? Many believe that we are safe, that our technology can protect us from anything. But what if we are wrong? Comment below. If a solar storm actually hit Earth, how do you think people would react? Would it be a total collapse, or would there be some way to survive? I want to know your opinion. What if I told you that something like this has happened before? What happened back then could be the key to understanding what awaits us. And believe me, the consequences were much worse than you imagine. Solar telescopes recorded something impressive. A huge crack opened on the surface of the sun. This phenomenon, called coronal hole, has been observed before. But this time, there is something different. He's bigger, more unstable, and could be about to release a wave of energy towards Earth. Coronal holes are regions where the sun's magnetic field opens up, allowing supercharged solar winds escape at extreme speeds, reaching millions of kilometers per hour. These winds are composed of highly energetic particles which travel through space and interact directly with the planets of the solar system. When these particles reach Earth, they can generate intense auroras and, in extreme cases, geomagnetic storms that impact satellites, power grids, and global communications. But what makes this rift different from the previous ones? In addition to its enormous size, its location and behavior worry scientists. Normally, coronal holes appear close to the poles of the sun, but this is forming near the equator, where coronal mass ejections, CMEs, are much more likely to be launched directly at Earth. This means that if an explosion occurs, the probability of impact is much greater than in common events. Another intriguing detail is that this coronal hole doesn't seem to be closing. The expected behavior would be for it to decrease over time, but on the contrary, it continues to expand and release increasingly intense streams of charged particles. This raises a serious question. Are we about to face an unprecedented solar event? This phenomenon is happening precisely in a critical period of the solar cycle, when the sun's activity reaches its peak. The solar cycle 25, which began in 2019, has already shown signs of being more intense than expected. In the coming months and years, we may see a dramatic increase in the number and strength of solar flares. Although coronal holes are relatively common, their combination with an active solar cycle can be a time bomb for our planet. What would happen if a powerful solar flare was aimed directly at Earth? This is the real danger we need to understand. If a coronal mass ejection, CME, were directed towards Earth, we would be facing an event that could completely change our reality. This explosion of charged particles travels through space at speeds greater than 8 million kilometers each, and when it reaches the Earth's magnetic field, it generates geomagnetic storms that can have devastating effects. The first signs that something is wrong would appear in space. Satellites would lose communication, GPS systems would fail, and astronauts on the International Space Station would need to protect themselves from dangerous levels of radiation. But these would only be the first impacts. On the Earth's surface, The real chaos would begin with the overload of the electrical grid. Transformers would explode, transmission lines would burn, and entire cities would be plunged into darkness. Unlike a simple temporary blackout, this damage could take months, or even years to be repaired. We are talking about the complete collapse of electrical infrastructure, something our civilization has never faced before. No electricity, hospitals would be left without vital equipment, markets would not be able to operate, water supply systems would be interrupted, digital money would become useless, and panic would spread quickly. Without internet, without communication, without functioning transport, cities would become true zones of despair. The question that remains is, would we be prepared to survive without technology? Most people never need to think about it. How vulnerable are we to a threat we cannot prevent? You may have already realized that this is not just another video. What we are discussing could determine the future of civilization. If this type of knowledge is important to you, click like now. Therefore, YouTube understands that more people need to know about this, and this content can reach those who still have no idea what is coming. But the scariest evidence is yet to come, because what happened in the past may just be a preview of what awaits us, and this time the consequences may be irreversible. In the early hours of September 1st, 1859, the sky began to shine abnormally. Intense northern lights have appeared in places they should never be, lighting up the skies of tropical regions like the Caribbean and Central America. Farmers in Europe woke up in the middle of the night, believing the sun was already rising, while miners in Colorado prepared their tools, convinced that the day had begun early. Nobody knew yet, but the largest solar storm ever recorded in modern history was about to cause an unprecedented technological meltdown. It all started a few days earlier, when astronomers observed a gigantic eruption on the surface of the sun. At the time, understanding of solar activity was still limited, and no one imagined that this explosion of energy would travel through space at an impressive speed, reaching Earth in less than 18 hours. When the wave of charged particles finally collided with the planet's magnetic field, the impact was devastating. Telegraph systems, the most advanced communications technology of the time, completely collapsed. Cables caught fire spontaneously. Operators received electric shocks, and some telegraph stations continued to work even after being completely disconnected from the electrical network, powered only by the intense electrical current induced by the storm's magnetic field. And that was just a side effect. If a solar storm of this level occurred today, the damage would be incomparably greater. In 1859, the world did not yet depend on satellites, electricity, or digital communications networks. But now, our entire modern infrastructure would be destroyed in a matter of minutes. Satellites responsible for telecommunications would be deactivated or completely burned. This would mean the downfall of the global internet, failures in banking systems, transport, emergency services, and even the distribution of food and medicine. The difference between 1859 and today is frightening. At that time, humanity was just a spectator of the phenomenon. Today, we are hostages to our own technology, and a similar event could put us in an unprecedented crisis. And the most disturbing question is, was the Carrington event an isolated event, or just a warning of what is yet to come? Answer me here, in the comments, because some evidence suggests that solar storms of this magnitude may occur more frequently than we realize. While most people go about their routine without worry, away from the public eye, scientists around the world monitor the sun with maximum attention. NASA, the European Space Agency, ESA, and several astronomical institutes have already issued warnings about what could be coming. And contrary to what many imagine, the risk is not hypothetical. It is real and is getting closer. Experts note the solar cycle 25, which is already proving to be more intense than expected. This cycle, which lasts an average of 11 years, is the period in which the sun reaches its peak of activity, with a drastic increase in the number of solar flares and coronal mass ejections, CMEs. In 2025, this activity is expected to reach its peak, which means a much greater risk of powerful solar storms hitting Earth. NASA monitors this gigantic crack in the sun and warns that she can release a blast of charged particles at any time. The Solar Dynamics Observatory, SDO, and other space missions monitor the situation constantly, but the response time for a large-scale solar storm is still extremely short. If a coronal mass ejection is launched our way, scientists might only be able to detect it hours before impact, which means that practically there would not be enough time to prevent large-scale damage. The world's main power grids could collapse before any action could be taken. And the most disturbing truth, scientists agree that it's not a question of if a major solar storm will happen, but when. At any moment, we could be surprised by a solar flare so powerful that it could erase our digital civilization in a single day. There are signs that most people don't notice, but that may indicate that something is already underway. And the worst, maybe we are ignoring the latest warnings that science is trying to give us. Stay here as you will discover the hidden clues that may prove this threat is not just a distant possibility, but an ongoing countdown. Now stop and think. What would happen if, right now, everything shut down? Your cell phone would have no signal. The internet would simply disappear. No calls could be made. No bank would work. Digital money would cease to exist. Cards would not pass. Payment applications would be inoperative, and the global financial market would collapse in a few hours. The blackout would not last just a few minutes or a few hours. Electrical networks could take months or even years to be restored. And without electricity, the entire structure that supports our society would begin to collapse. Supermarkets would be emptied quickly. Without working transport, there would be no way to restock the shelves. The distribution of drinking water, which depends on electrical systems, would be interrupted, and millions of people would be left without basic access to water for drinking or cooking. In hospitals, the situation would be desperate. No electricity, respirators, hemodialysis machines, and surgical equipment would stop working. People in ICUs would be doomed. Medicines that require refrigeration would be lost, while surgeries would be cancelled indefinitely. And this wouldn't just happen in an isolated place. It would be a global domino effect. Planes would lose their navigation mid-flight, forcing pilots to land in the dark without communication. Satellites would fall into disuse, disrupting any attempt to coordinate an emergency response. Without communication networks, governments would have difficulty containing the chaos, and social order would begin to crumble. And now comes the big question. Could the collapse of technology be the real problem? Or would the greatest danger come from the way people react in the face of uncertainty and fear? Because history has already proven one thing. When the system fails, society shows its darkest side. Now tell me, if the entire world collapsed because of a solar storm, do you think humanity would be able to rise again? Or would we be doomed to return to the Dark Ages and going even further? Could events like this, have they happened before and erased entire civilizations from history? Or worse, could it be that this type of catastrophe was somehow already predicted and we are simply ignoring the signs? Comment below. What is the most intriguing hypothesis about the universe that has ever crossed your mind? Does the sun hide mysteries that we still don't understand? Or perhaps there are even greater cosmic forces influencing our destiny? I want to see your craziest ideas in the comments. Who knows, maybe one of them will become the next video on the channel. Faced with an invisible and unavoidable threat like an extreme solar storm, the question everyone should ask is not if this could happen, but how we can prepare for the worst. Governments and scientists are already studying ways to minimize the damage. Some nations, such as the United States and the United Kingdom, have begun to develop more resistant electrical networks with transformers shielded against electromagnetic overloads. However, these advances are still far from being a definitive solution. The truth is, if an event of this level were to happen today, most countries would face absolute collapse. Currently, scientists can predict smaller solar storms up to a few days in advance, but there is no way to stop them from reaching Earth. If a gigantic solar storm is aimed at our planet, there is no technology capable of stopping it. And the reality is even more worrying. Our vital infrastructures depend on a fragile and interconnected electrical grid. A direct impact on the system could cause chain blackouts, affecting not only electricity, but also water supplies, telecommunications, hospitals, banks, and transport. But what about the average person? Is there any way to survive an event like this? Survival experts warn that if a global technological meltdown occurs, the first few days will be chaotic. Those who are prepared will have a better chance of facing the crisis. Some key recommendations include emergency stock, maintaining clean water, non-perishable food, and basic supplies can ensure survival in the early days of the collapse. Solar generators and batteries, as the electrical grid may take months to restore. Alternative energy sources will be crucial. Communication radios. Without internet and telephony, shortwave radios and analog systems may be the only way to obtain information about the situation. Knowledge and planning. Knowing how to purify water, store food, and protect yourself from civil unrest can be just as important as physical resources. But perhaps the biggest question of all is, if we already know that such an event can happen, why are so few people really prepared? Are we underestimating this threat? Or is there something we don't yet know about the true risks of what may lie ahead? As science tries to predict and understand solar storms, there are those who believe that not everything is being revealed to the public. Some theories suggest that large governments and space agencies already know much more than they disclose, and that there is secret preparation going on behind the scenes. Are world leaders the only ones truly ready for a catastrophic solar event, while the rest of the population remains uninformed? One of the most popular speculations states that NASA hides data on the real intensity of solar storms to avoid global panic. This is because if a large CME were on its way to Earth, there would not be much that could be done to prevent its effects. And announce this information, it could generate immediate chaos, collapsing financial markets, governments, and even social order. But there is something even more disturbing. What if some of these solar storms weren't entirely natural? There are theorists who claim that it is possible that certain solar flares could be intensified or even triggered artificially. How would this happen? Some point to secret experiments involving electromagnetic waves and manipulation of the Earth's magnetic field. Could there be a technology capable of interacting with the sun in ways we can't even imagine? Others suggest that these solar storms may be a cyclical phenomenon recorded millennia ago by ancient civilizations who already knew about extreme solar events and may have even been victims of a technological meltdown in the past. Be that as it may, the question remains, are we receiving all the information or just carefully filtered fragments? And in the midst of so many theories, what can we really conclude about the future? Now tell me, how many people really know about this threat? The truth is that many people don't even imagine that something like this could happen. How much of our reality is truly safe, and how much are we just trusting that nothing will go wrong? You are part of a select group that seeks to understand the mysteries of the universe. But this information cannot remain just between us. Share this video now with those who need to know this. Let's spread this discussion and bring more people to this conversation. The sun has always been a symbol of life and energy, but at the same time, it is an unpredictable force, capable of triggering events that can completely change the course of civilization. The possibility of an extreme solar storm is not just theory, it is a scientific reality. If something like this happens, our dependence on modern technology may become our greatest weakness. The big question is not just whether we are prepared, but if we are ready to deal with the unknown. The universe follows its own rhythm, indifferent to our certainties. And when the next big solar storm hits, we will be facing a definitive test of our technological survival. But this is just one of the many mysteries surrounding the cosmos. With each answer we find, new questions arise, and some of them could change everything we believe we know about the universe. If you want to continue exploring these riddles, subscribing to the channel is more than just watching videos. It's embarking on a journey through theories and discoveries that challenge the limits of science and imagination. Here, each question leads to a new mystery. And now, get ready for the next video. Because what you just saw is just one piece of the puzzle. The next revelation could challenge everything we know and change your perception of reality forever.